And chapterization would give a structure to your thesis, and it becomes very important for you all to have a very logical chapterization, and each and every chapter that you are deciding should have connection with your topic, with your research objective, with your research question, and there should also be coherence between the chapters, right? So chapterization becomes a very important aspect of your whole PhD journey. I would want it to be a very interactive session. We can take some examples here and there so that you get some more clarity. So, like I've already told you, the entire structure of your thesis revolves around the different chapters you have selected. It would also depend upon whether you have chosen empirical research, or whether you have chosen doctrinal research, or whether your research is about a comparative study whereby you are making a comparative analysis with another jurisdiction. So in such case, how should your chapterization look like? So sir would be sharing the screen, and we would be able to see some of the tips that I have here with you all. Now, because I want it to be an interactive session, yeah, somebody has asked me to use Hindi language. I will try, but I think most of the audiences would prefer English, but I'll try to use Hindi also in between. So now it also depends upon whether you are doing an empirical research or doctrinal research. So in empirical research, also your focus is not mostly on the secondary data, which has already been into existence because of some primary research or because of other literature, but you are collecting your own data. So in that case, your chapterization would be different. Okay. So sir, will you be able to share the screen? Okay. Anyway, so let's start it with an activity. Okay, I will give you my own research topic. You all suggest me. I have already completed my PhD, but I want your perspective, and then I will tell you how did I decide that these are the chapters and these are the sub chapters. Along with the chapters, one very important aspect is sub chapter, because if your chapter is, let's say, legal framework, and you are talking about only statutes, you're not talking about the judicial trend, so that is also one aspect. So when we talk about chapterization, it will give you a broader idea of what you are going to discuss in this chapter. Within the chapters, you need to have sub chapters. So I'll give you my topic. I would want your perspective. Okay, you can type it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself, and you can also participate. So my topic was, I'll just give you the broad topic, I'll not tell you the exact topic. It was with regards to parental incarceration and its impact on children. When I say parental incarceration, I mean to say the children whose parents are in prison. So my research revolved around this topic. So can anybody suggest me what should be my chapters? Please don't refer to my thesis on Shodh Ganga. Just tell me from your perspective, what do you think would be appropriate? How should I start? How should I move ahead? What should be my second chapter? And to decide this, what questions should we keep in our mind? Can anybody participate? Because this is the exercise that
Yes,
you
Dr. Nidhi,
also.
yeah. Dr.
Yes sir.
Sorry for a while. Let me introduce
No
yourself
problem.
in a bit. So thank you.
Okay, okay.
So thank you very much. Good evening, all the participants for joining, and then welcome, Dr. Nidhi Saroj. So thank you very much for accepting, like proactively, sir. I'll be talking about this particular topic. Then we discuss, because the brief topic that we are discussing about this series. So Dr. Nidhi Saroj, she has completed her PhD from Gujarat National Law University and LL.M from the NALSAR Hyderabad. And before joining, he's currently working in Christ University, Bangalore. And before that, she worked in Nirma also, and then Reva University and CMR University at Bangalore also. And then she'll be talking about the strategy for chapterization in today's the our the mentoring series. So on behalf of Law Teachers India, we welcome you, and then over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words and also for inviting me. So I think I was interacting with them before I moved to my PPT. I just asked you all that मैंने आप लोगों को एक टॉपिक दिया जो कि मेरा खुद का टॉपिक है, which is parental incarceration. Incarceration means imprisonment and its impact on children in India. ठीक है, this is the research topic, and please, because I'm from the law field, so the topic is a socio-legal research. So you need to advise me, how should I go about it? What should be my first step? Because we are talking about chapterization, I assume that you already know about your research question, you already know about your research objective, and you already know about your research hypothesis. Now I need to decide, because it is about parental incarceration, should I talk about juvenile justice? Because area, the victim here, the main focus area is children. Should I talk about juvenile justice? In my topic, I have not mentioned any other jurisdiction. But should I talk about any other jurisdiction? Should I have a chapter on the best practices in US or in other country? So I want you all to interact so that we find out, we figure out what should be the step to decide which all chapters. Because when you choose a topic, it is very broad. When I say parental incarceration, it would talk about developmental issues that the children may face. It may talk about the discrimination that they face. It may talk about intergenerational incarceration, because sometimes we have seen that if somebody is incarcerated, their child also gets incarcerated. So we need to decide from this broader area, how do we have chapters? In the chapters, we have sub chapters, and then finally we conclude our research. I hope you all are getting me. At least you can just write a yes or no in the chat box. Are you all listening to me? Yes. So I just have put a question to you. So this is the topic. How do you think? What should be my first step? Okay, so because you are not talking to me, I will tell you by myself. Now, the first thing that I will do is I will look into my title, I will look into my research question, and I will look into my research objective. First of all, I am sure in the previous sessions and through your coursework also, you would have understood that your title, research objective, research question should be aligned. They should sync together. If your research topic is about parental incarceration, but objective does not use this word, or research question does not highlight, then it is not meaningful. So firstly, we will look into all these three things, and then we will try to draw broad chapters which will answer the research questions. So first of all, sir, can we move to the next slide? Yes. So today, what am I going to talk about? Firstly, what does chapterization mean? I have given you a brief idea that chapterization would help you to structure your thesis, through which you will be answering your research questions. Now, what should be the title of the chapter? How many sub chapters should you have? How do we connect chapter number 1 to chapter number 2? Because I'll tell you from my own experience, when I wrote my chapter 1, I was having a different mindset, and after 2 months I wrote chapter 2. When I read chapter 1, it made meaning to me. When I read chapter 2, it was meaningful to me. But when I read them together, I felt that they are not part of the same thesis. There was no coherence between them. So how do we do this sequencing? What is the process for it? So I will give you some examples, and I'll also give you some tips how should we go about it. Then I will also give you a brief account of doctrinal and empirical researches, so that how, if you are doing a, because I am sure most of us, even if we are doing empirical research, it would have elements of doctrinal research. So I will tell you about that. And lastly, I will also suggest you some activities which you can do by your own for completing your thesis, so that we need to check again and again whether we are going in the right direction or not. Like I told you, when I wrote chapter 1, मुझे लगा कि it is very nice. When I wrote chapter 2, I felt it is also very nice. But when I read both of them together, sometimes I felt that there is similarity. What I wrote in chapter 1, that is there in chapter 2 also. Sometimes I felt that there is no connection between them. So we need to keep doing some activities to find out our own mistakes, and then come up with the best version of our own thesis, right? So moving on to the next slide. Yes. Now, like I told you, it's very basic, because we are talking about chapterization. What is chapterization? I mean, you can just write your thesis like an essay, but it won't make sense, because you already know that research is something which should make sense, which should be meaningful, and not just a law person, but a layman should also be able to understand. So we need to make it very structured. And how do we make it structure? When there is flow, clarity, and alignment. I have been telling this to you right from the very beginning, that the first step before you start doing your chapterization is to align your title, research objective, research question and to check whether everything is aligned or not. And then on the basis of research question, let's say for my research question in this particular topic is, what are the physical, social, and health related issues faced by these children? Now, this is my research question. I'm not using the exact language. Now, what do you think should be my chapter? So the chapter can either be on identifying the issues and challenges faced by these children, or the chapter may be what are the existing laws to deal with these challenges. So your chapter should be in connection with your research question and research objective. Furthermore, each chapter should have a distinct purpose. So each chapter should answer a research question, and each chapter should be aligned with a research objective. With this chapter, I am trying to, I always feel that, you should make a table: research question, research objective, and chapter. The research question number 1 is connected to which research objective and which chapter addresses it. Research question number 2 and research objective number 3, are they connected to each other? So this table, if you make, it will be really very meaningful and fruitful to you. And I am sure with this, you will be moving in the correct direction. So your chapters should be connected to each other. They should be connected to the research objectives, and they should be meaningful to the entire conclusion also. We will be taking some examples. This is just the introduction part. And I will also be asking you some questions in between. Till now, nobody has been participating, but I'm sure when we move ahead, there would be some participation. Yes. So can we move to the... Yes. Now, typically, I'm sure all of you must have seen some thesis in your life. And mostly these structure that you see is an introduction part, then you see literature review, research methodology, then comes the core analysis chapters, whereby either there is an analysis of the existing legal framework or there is an analysis of the data that you have collected, right? However, the issue is that different universities follow different patterns. Sometimes you may see that in the very introduction chapter, literature review has also been provided, research methodology has also been provided. However, I think it totally depends upon the topic. It is not necessary that all the time you have literature review in the very first chapter. If you want to do an extensive literature review, especially when you are doing a doctrinal research and you are only relying on literature, existing literature, but it does not end here. Literature review means you are reviewing it, you are highlighting the gaps, and you are also mentioning what are the what is the use of this particular literature in your research. In the core chapters, you will have to do an analysis, you will have to highlight the other aspects related to the literature. So this is the basic structure, whereby you introduce, in the introduction, you talk about your research objectives, hypothesis, research questions, your limitations and findings. Very important. I think you all should be very much clear with your first chapter. If your first chapter has been drafted properly, you get an idea, you get a strategy so as to how your other chapters should look like, right? So if you look into a typical structure, obviously introduction, if you want, you can include the literature review. Like in my case, my university had prescribed that you can include the literature review in that chapter also. But there are batchmates who have included a brief literature review in chapter 1 just to highlight the gaps. And then they have done literature review separately also, whereby they have highlighted the gaps in detail, and they have also highlighted the analysis of the literature, and they have combined also thematic literature review also they have done. Research methodology, again, if you want, you can have a separate chapter, or you can have it in the introduction part also. But I feel whenever you are doing a core empirical research, you should have a separate chapter on research methodology, because you will have to talk about sample size, you will have to talk about how do you choose this sample, you will have to talk about the population, the universe, how did you conduct the interview. So in such case, I think research methodology should be a separate chapter. Or you can include it with your empirical research chapter. Generally, we have one. If you're doing an empirical, if you're doing a combination research, there is one chapter dedicated for the empirical research. So I feel that in that chapter only, you can have either 1 or 2 paragraphs on research methodology. Core analysis chapters. Now, these chapters would be addressing your research objectives and your research questions finally, the findings and suggestions. Here, you are going to only talk about the fact that based on this chapter, I have come to this finding, and this is what is my final outcome. So here you will have to do an analysis. If you are doing a combination research, you have to select one research question and you have to highlight in your finding that based on this chapter, based on this, I have come to this finding. Again, this can also be in a form of table so that it becomes more reader friendly. Suggestions, and lastly conclusion, whereby you are concluding all your chapters. So this is a typical structure, right? I'm sure everybody knows about it, and then we will take some examples also to understand it further. So can you please move to the next slide? Somebody has posted a question. Is there any guideline from UGC regarding chapter numbers? Or no, there is no such guideline. It totally depends upon you and your supervisor. There's no such guidelines. With regards to number of words also, it is the discretion of the university. So every university has their own criteria. Some universities have fixed number of words. It is not on the basis of chapters. Usually they fix number of words. So you can see, you can check with your university. Usually there is no such prescription. Now, if you look into doctrinal research, so like again, I told you in the introduction part itself, in this chapter only, you have to first highlight the statement of problem. You have to first give the background. You have to talk about the topic. You have to, if you are doing a legal research, obviously you have to connect it with law. You have to talk about the statutory framework, and then you have to highlight your research objective, research question, hypothesis. In the second chapter, you can see that we have to talk about conceptual framework, where you will be talking about the topic. Then judicial evolution, you have to talk about the judicial trend from where it started. I have some examples in the upcoming slides, which we will see how it started from a particular judgment and what is the current status. Then statutory framework, whereby you will have to talk about the you will have to talk about the statutes and how the statutes have evolved over the time. Comparative analysis, again, this is not mandatory. If you have specifically mentioned in your title with a comparative analysis, I feel you can have a dedicated chapter, or else you can merge 4 and 5. It totally depends upon you. 6, challenges and suggestions. Here you have to highlight something related to the future research or some aspects which you could not answer, and the suggestions which you could draw on the basis of the research that you have conducted, and then the conclusion. Somebody has asked the difference between point 5 and point 6. Point 5 deals with comparative analysis, whereby we are referring to some other jurisdiction. Point 6 talks about challenges and suggestions. It's just like discussion and finding. And then you are highlighting that these are the challenges and these are the suggestions that are being made. Moving on to the empirical research chapterization. So can you please move? Yes. Now here you can see that in empirical research, I have separately put something on literature review and methodology. Please understand, this is just suggestive, right? We will be taking some examples also. Every research is different. Ultimately, the main point that you should keep in mind is your title, your research objective, your research question should be aligned, and these research questions and objectives should be addressed in the chapters. This is the Guru Mantra. Now, which chapters you are going to choose, which way you are going to choose, totally depends on how you are comfortable. Just because I am telling you that this is the way, or some previous researcher has done in that way, doesn't mean that this is perfect. Ultimately, it's your own research. But by the end, it should be addressing your research questions and your research objectives. So here again, in the introduction chapter itself, all those aspects related to objectives, questions, hypothesis would be included. Legal framework, again, it's like the statutory framework. I have put another chapter on literature review because I feel that in some researches, it's very important to have a distinct chapter on literature review, because we are not just summarizing, we are also doing an analysis. The mistake that most of the researchers do, they would just analyze, they will just summarize that in this literature, this was held. they do not connect it to their own research, that in this research how I am intending to use it, and this is the gap which was not addressed, and they do not connect to literature. So that's why I feel that literature review in some cases should be a separate chapter. In empirical research, when it's a core empirical research, I feel there should be a separate chapter on methodology, right? Then field findings, because obviously you are going to do a field research when you are doing an empirical research. Here I feel that there should be a dedicated chapter. So I'll tell you about my research also in a while. Analysis is just results and discussion on results and findings. Recommendations, if you want, you can merge, you can have a separate chapter, but when you are doing a core empirical research, I feel that there should be a separate chapter. You can have it, but it is, again, I'm telling you, these are all suggestive. It is not that you have to follow this way only. This is just subjective. This is just to build your fundamentals so that you understand how you have to go about it, right? Now, sir, can we move to the next chapter, next slide? Yes. Now, this is the most important aspect. Here, I would want your participation. How should we effectively decide that this is going to be the chapter? I'll tell you from my journey, then maybe I would want you all to participate also. So I told you in the very beginning, my research was a socio-legal study of parental incarceration and its impact on children. And it was a combination of doctrinal and empirical. So when I decided to work on this chapter, I first wrote the introduction chapter, which was why, we always have to justify why we chose this topic. So we have to highlight on the basis of existing literature that these are the challenges, these are the issues, and these are the research gaps which need to be answered. So I started with a background, and then I framed my research questions, which were initially very broad, research objectives, in alignment to that hypothesis, findings, because and not findings, limitations, and then I made a tentative chapterization. Initially, the chapters that I chose were very broad. I thought because it's on parental incarceration, and it was a socio-legal study. So because it's on parental incarceration, one chapter would be dedicated to parental incarceration. Because it is a socio-legal study, one chapter I will have on society, child, and law. Because it is parental incarceration and its impact, please understand I'm focusing on each and every word of my title, and on that basis I have drafted my research questions. Now I am deciding what chapters am I going to do. So introduction, I told you what would be the content. Then I told you another chapter that I'm going to have, because it is about parental incarceration, would be on parental incarceration. But here I have not decided whether legal aspects, whether parental incarceration and the criminal justice system, whether parental incarceration and the prison system. So I have not decided. I have just broadly decided that these are the areas. Common sensically also, you can think, if you focus on your title properly, you need to divide your title. And this division should also be in alignment with your research objective and research question. Can I just have, somebody to tell me whether you are all getting me or not? Because I feel I'm just talking, and you are all not even listening to me. Can somebody answer it in the chat box?
Yes, participant, sorry, not participant, I would say faculty members, students are there.
Yeah.
So please interact. It is not a lecture, so please ask, some, uh, maybe you will be planning PhD or already doing PhD, so it will help you interaction.
Okay, fine. I think we got. Okay. Yes. So I told you all that I broke down my title. Okay. But now I have not decided that which aspect, because I'm telling you, everything is so broad. We feel that, it's very simple to write. We just start writing like an essay, but that's not the scientific way of doing a research. We need to narrow it down. And to be honest, it is not possible for us to address everything, even in a PhD research. We need to structure it down. And this is the reason why in the very first chapter, there is something called as limitations, right? Now, so I started very broad. When I started writing my chapter, so I had told you that I decided to keep one chapter on impact of parental incarceration. Because I felt it is related to law, I further narrowed it down to parental incarceration and criminal justice system. Now, when I decided it is going to be criminal justice system, I broke down criminal justice system also into different parts: parental incarceration and police, parental incarceration and court, parental incarceration and judiciary, and prison authorities. Are you all getting my point? So you have to start it broad, then you have to narrow it down. And how do we do it? By doing a literature review, by identifying the gap. So it is a very technical and a logical process. But what happens in between, we forget the continuity. Like I told you in the very beginning, I wrote my chapter 1. Now I decided I will have chapters on this aspect. I will have one chapter on socio-legal, society, child and law. I'll have one chapter on parental incarceration and criminal justice system. I didn't understand whether I should put parental incarceration and criminal justice system as second chapter or third chapter. So this sequence also needs to be decided. How it has to be done? You have to keep doing some activity. There are some activities which I have enlisted for you in the end, which will help you to identify the sequence. So you need to do this exercise regularly. We usually think that it is just about writing, but it is not just about writing. It is coming out with the best version of your writing, right? So you need to keep doing these activities. You need to keep checking your work by your own, with the help of your supervisor or by your peers. You need to make sure that there is continuity and coherence. And most importantly, each chapter must answer a part of research question. Like I told you, my first chapter introduction, second chapter that was on child, society and law. So one of my research questions was on the impact of society on the children whose parents are incarcerated, how society treats these children. So this chapter aimed to address this particular research question. And my research objective was also in alignment to the same, to identify the practices of society with something related to this, right? Then the third chapter which I decided was on criminal justice system, interaction of criminal justice system and children of incarcerated parents. So how the criminal justice system interacts. So this was the research question broadly, and there was a similar research objective also. Fourthly, it is very important to keep chapters in balanced length. I have read some thesis whereby chapter 1 is very small, but chapter 2 is huge. Chapter 3 is again very small. What is the idea of having chapters? We are making it simpler. We are making it simpler to read. We are making it logical to read. At one go, one person will read maybe 1 or 2 chapters. If you're making one chapter too long, then it's not a proper chapterization. So your chapter should also be decided in such a way that it is balanced. And this is not something which you will learn in one day. That is why it takes a lot of time even to fix the chapters. And I'll tell you from my own experience, even if you fix your chapters, till the end, there would be additions, there would be subtractions, there would be changes, right? So it is very important to have the chapters in balanced length. And how do we do it? We decided in the very beginning, I had done this, that chapter number 1, so many words, chapter number 2, so many words. But that does not mean because we are fixing the words then we are going to compromise with the content. Ultimately, we have to keep revising and we have to come up with the best version of it. Then subheadings. What I'm trying to tell you is subchapters are very important. It is not just chapterization. Once you do your tentative chapterization, after that, when you are working on the chapters, I will suggest you, before you start writing, you first structure the chapter. We structure the whole thesis at the very introduction level. When we start writing the chapter, we need to do sub-chapterization. Like I'll give you example from my own research. My third chapter was on parental incarceration and criminal justice system. Right now itself, I told you that I divided it into sub-chapters. First one was an introduction, and also it is there in the last point also. You should always write an introductory paragraph for that particular chapter, and you also need to have a conclusion for that entire chapter. So I had done it for my thesis also, and I would recommend it to you all also, so that you get a clarity and the reader also understand that this is the reason why this particular chapter has been written. Now, furthermore, subchapterization, which I was telling you all about, is very important because again, the logical flow and clarity would come if you have decided in advance. It should not be like trial and error. There would be error, but it should not be in a very unsystematic manner. So you should keep revising it. You should divide your chapters into subparts so that it makes more meaning and it is more logical, right? Because you're not interacting, I am forced that in the end I will definitely be giving you some activities and exercises, right? So can we move on to the next slide, sir? Yes. Now I am definitely talking about chapterization, but there is one more issue. What should be the title of the chapter itself? Whether I'm going to use criminal justice system, or I'm going to use the word justice system, or I'm going to use the word imprisonment, or I'm going to use the word incarceration. See, chapterization is one thing. Choosing the right title is another thing, right? Because especially when we are law people, we need to choose the words very carefully, and your chapter title should again be in connection to your main title, to your research objective, to your research question. I told you all in the very beginning that you need to have a table. I did it. In fact, you can also find it in my thesis in chapter number 1. I made a table: research question, research objective, and the related chapter. And finally, what is the conclusion? So I made it towards the end, but I had started working on it right from the very beginning, right? That this, because ultimately your research question should be answered. You have put one research question, but ultimately it has not been answered, then your research is meaningless. So in fact, the research title also that you are choosing, it should make sense and it should be connected to your research, your thesis title. It should be very clear and specific. Do not keep it too broad and too narrow. Too narrow also is not suggested, because then you will not be able to include many things. It should be thematic and non generic. When I say thematic, it should be connected to the theme, it should be connected to the research, it should reflect what you are going to talk about. So let's say if I write parental incarceration and criminal justice system, if I just write this much, can you make out what is going to be the content? It's too broad. So if you write interaction of criminal justice system with children of incarcerated parents, then it makes sense that we are going to talk about how various elements of the criminal justice system interact with these children. So various elements of criminal justice system mean the police, the court, the prison authorities. Are you all getting my point? Now, professional intern, I have seen sometimes they just use the words very randomly, like uh, instead of statutory framework, they'll just write laws related. I mean, that is also okay, but by the end of the day, it should be connected to your thesis, and it should be connected to the law that you have chosen. It should be connected to the area. The words that you have chosen should also be legal and professional in nature, right? So this is not just with regards to how the chapterization should be done, this is with regards to how the chapter title should be fixed. And this won't happen again in one day. You, like I told you in the previous slide, first you choose a broader title and then you choose a narrower one. Is that clear to you? Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes. Now, I told this to you in the very beginning that along with chapterization, sub-chapters are very, very, very important. You will see in almost all the thesis, if chapter number 5 is this, then you will have 5.1, sometimes 5.1.1, 5.2.1, 5.3. So again, please be very, very clear that everything should be consistent. They should be logical. They should be connected to each other. Like I've given you an example here. For some research, the broader title was judicial trends. So now you can't just keep talking about judicial trend in a paragraph form. You need to divide it. You need to highlight the evolution. Now it depends on you whether you are going to do it on the basis of years or whether you are going to do it on the basis of the theme. It totally depends, but you have to divide it into parts so that it becomes simpler for the audience to read it, right? So the strategies that you are choosing for sub chapter is also again very important. Either you can follow a theme based, case based, or chronological order based. You have to make it logical, coherent, and connected, right? Sir, can we please move to the next slide? Yes. I don't know whether you are going to participate now, but these are some of the activities which I did for my thesis, and it really worked. So, first time, what I did was when I prepared my chapterization, it was not just a chapterization. I wrote 2-3 lines about every chapter so that I understand that whether chapter 2 I have written should be in the second place or should be in the third place. Then you get a logical flow. So I'll tell you now about my research. Can anybody suggest me now so that I can tell you whether I actually followed this way or not and what was my way? You can write it in the chat box. I hope you understood my topic. My topic was related to socio-legal study of parental incarceration and its impact on children in India. What do you think? Chapter 1 obviously would talk about introduction, and it will have research question, research objectives, hypothesis. What do you think should I move? And then I have already told you one chapter was on empirical research, whereby I interacted with the affected children and parents. So can anybody suggest me what should I do? Or if anybody wants, they can mention their topic and then their title, and then we can all have an interaction and we can decide whether the chapters that this person has chosen is in the correct direction or not. Anybody willing to do so? Somebody has posted this question: research questions and objectives should be same in numbers. Not necessary, but every research question must be aligned to some research objective. Now there may be a possibility that one research objective is aligned to two research questions. So there is no such maths that if research questions are 5 in number. Most of the times they do suggest, uh, but then it's not required. Okay, somebody has written whether chapter on empirical, when the chapter is on empirical finding, what should be the contents in it. Yes. Now, because my research was partly empirical, now it was on the basis of questionnaire. First of all, when you are doing an empirical research, you need to fix the tool that you are going to use, whether it is going to be a qualitative one, whether it is going to be a quantitative one. Then when it is a questionnaire or interview, how you are going to conduct it, how have you chosen the sample, what is the universe, what was your strategy, whether it was purposive sampling, how did you do that, right? So firstly, an introduction to the empirical research. Then in the methodology part, you have to talk about sampling strategy, universe, then the tool that you are going to use. You also need to mention which research question are you going to address, because most of us do not do core empirical researches. We do a combination, right? So you need to mention that which research objective or research question are you going to address. Then you need to analyze. Now, especially if it is a qualitative research, you have to do a thematic analysis. And if it is now, for that there are softwares also. I'm sure in the forthcoming mentoring session we may have some session on that also. There is SPSS, then there are NVivo, there are different tools. You have to mention how you have done. If it is a quantitative one, I would suggest you to use those bar graphs to highlight. If it is about let's say in my research there were children in different age groups, so that was the only quantitative aspect. However, mostly it was qualitative in nature because my sample size was also less. So I had put charts, how many males were there, how many females were there. So your empirical chapter should contain all these things and in a very systematic manner. Furthermore, when you have highlighted all the basics, then it totally depends. Either you can annex the questionnaire, or the interview schedule in the end, or you can just mention it. So the responses, obviously you annex it in the end, but the sample you can put it in the chapter also, that these were the questions that were asked. Then you have to do a brief analysis. So now there are two schools of thought, that you are analyzing the findings in the same chapter, or you are having a separate chapter on results and discussion. So in the next chapter you can have a discussion chapter whereby you are saying that 59% responded in this, then 60% responded in this, and in this chapter itself you will be doing your hypothesis testing. So in my thesis I divided it into two chapters, because again I told you in the very beginning the length of the chapter, right? It can't be too long, it needs to be balanced. So that's why I divided it into two parts. So I think, Siji, you got my point. So in your empirical research, you need to first introduce, whereby you are highlighting that these are the research tools and these are the research questions I'm going to use. Then you have to talk about your tools and your sample size. How did you go about it? Then you have to you have to do the analysis, and ultimately you have to test the hypothesis, which can either be in the same chapter or which can be in the next chapter. Any other questions? Okay. So like I told you, the first activity that you can do is chapter purpose. Just write a brief summary. Okay. That, this chapter is going to do this. You may wonder what is the point of doing this, but I'm telling you with personal experience, nobody shared their topic, otherwise we would have done this exercise. So what we can understand from this is to find out whether the chapters are in the logical sequence or not. Then conduct a legal authority audit. So what I did in my case, I felt that there are very few case laws that I had used. So then one day what I did, I found out some existing thesis which were in relation to my, obviously we can't find same, but I found out some thesis on the Shodh Ganga which were very similar. So I made a list of all the cases in all those theses, and I tried to keep a check whether I've included or not, whether I have included all the statutes or not. So this test, this auditing, self audit, you need to keep doing in PhD at various junctures. Obviously by the end you have to stop somewhere, otherwise it's a never ending journey. But during your 4-year, 5-year, 6-year journey, I think you have to keep doing this self audit. Then reverse outline your chapter. Now sometimes to check the flow, I used to read it in the backward direction. So this is very important. In fact, the whole thesis, now when I read my thesis, I read it in the backward direction to understand whether there is flow or not, and it actually helps. Peer review is obviously very important. Summarize in one slide. See what happens, ultimately we write this 300, 400 pages thesis, but then when your defense takes place, you only get some 1 hour, 1 hour 30 minutes. You have to explain everything in very brief time. So I used to practice it from the very beginning only, and that also helped me to understand the flow. Ultimately it's a journey from your title, in between research question, research objective, and the chapters answer it. I try to make it very simple by putting it in one slide, and to check whether there is a flow and there is a connection or not. Then chapter transition. I told you I was very confused when I wrote chapter 2. It was supposed to be chapter 3, but later on the basis of peer discussions, on the basis of the advice of the DRC members, I decided no, it should be in chapter number 3. So in chapter number 2, so that you need to do. Then explain it to a non-lawyer. This I've done many times. I have explained my topics to so many people, and I've told them, does this make sense, does this make sense, are you able to understand, is it logical? So please don't feel shy when you are doing PhD research. It is not just about your research, you have to keep interacting. And empirical research, not just from the perspective of your research objective and research question, but also with regards to your own quality. You need to ask people about their opinion. You need to read more and more related research. Even if you have not included them in your literature review, I feel that to make your research better, you need to do this audit, right? To find out whether you are moving on in the right direction or not, right? So I hope you got my point. I am willing to take some more questions here, some more comments here. And if at all anybody wants to share their title, or if somebody has not been able to decide the chapters, I would be willing to help if you are willing. You can unmute yourself, you can interact, and
Yeah,
I'm sure many of
yeah,
you are
participant, you
faculty.
can, yeah, sure, sure. Participant, you can
Many of
unmute yourself or put the question in the chat box. There are a couple of questions are there. My topic is denial of justice in India. I think it's very, it will be refined, obviously,
hmm.
from Sunila.
Okay, so I can see one topic here by C. Sunila, denial of justice in India. So, sir or ma'am, you need to further narrow it down. You are
Ma'am,
talking about denial. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sunila. My
Yes, ma'am.
topic it is denial of justice in India with reference to study with reference to Rangareddy district court district.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's restricted
So,
to only one district.
okay. So, I think that you are going to talk about the speedy justice, or you are going to see whether the justice system is delivering justice within time or not, or is it something else? Because, ma'am, on
Yes,
the
ma'am.
basis of the title that you have suggested, we can have different understanding. So, first of all, we need to narrow down your very topic itself. When you are saying denial of justice, who is going to be the victim here? Whether you are going to talk only about women victims, or you are going to talk about everybody in that district, or you are going to talk about criminal matters, or you are going to talk about civil matters, or
Okay.
you are going to talk
It's
about
it's limited to
matrimony.
civil matters only.
Yes. So, ma'am, first of all, I would suggest you to add this entire, even when we talk about civil matters may be property related disputes, it may be contract, or even if you are going to talk about all civil matters, in your introduction chapter itself, you will have to specify with, or in the main title itself, you have to specify with special reference to property matters or matrimonial matters. So, once you do that, then may I know whether you are doing an empirical research or a doctrinal research?
Empirical, ma'am. I was suggested to do empirical only.
So if you are doing an empirical, because you are going to focus on one district. So first of all, research question and research objective again should be aligned. And then because you're going to do empirical research, I suggest you to have a hypothesis. So your first chapter should deal with, first of all, why you chose this topic. And this would come under the heading of background, where you have to highlight that yes, this is a problem, and you have to use existing literature for this. You cannot just say on the basis of your assumptions. So you have to first highlight that, and then once you finalize your research objective and research questions, then you have to, in broad, you have to do the chapterization. And then, ma'am, because you're going to do an empirical research, so you have to decide whether you are going to interview the lawyers, the judges, or whether you are going to introduce the uh, victims. Whom are you going to interview? So that you need to decide what is going to be the sample size, whether you are going to interact with 20 people, 30 people. And once you finalize your chapter 1, when that becomes pakka, then you move to your chapters and sub-chapterization. But at this juncture, ma'am, I would suggest you to further refine down your topic, finalize your objective and question and hypothesis which are in alignment, and on that basis do a tentative chapterization. You can have one chapter on judicial trends related to speedy and fast justice in India. So where you can talk about the judicial trends, how the concept of, look, if you want locus standi, and then how the Supreme Court has tried to interpret speedy and fast justice. So that can be one of the chapters in the initial chapters. Then you can talk about statutory requirement. You can talk about the timelines which are provided in the CPC, because you're going to deal with civil matters, right? So, ma'am, first of all, you work, and this is a common suggestion for everybody. First, work on chapter 1. Once your chapter 1 is fine, you yourself would keep getting ideas on how you can further refine. So this is my advice to you, ma'am. I hope it was helpful. Otherwise, you can contact me further also once you have worked on chapter 1. Now, I can also see one more topic here. Assessing international law's role in protecting internal displaced person. Okay, so again, I am sure it's going to be. Can we have the participant? Can you please interact with me? Inam Mitrabati.
Uh, Deepa, please control your annotation. Deepa.
Yes. So it's going to be a doctrinal research, I assume, Inam. I think you've written yes for that. Yes. So first of all, your research topic, I feel you have to give a evolutionary transaction of international law. Although it is related to displaced person, but you should also talk about international law and evolution in one of the chapters. That is very important because, like I told you, my topic was related to parental incarceration, broadly related to juvenile justice. So I had included one chapter on evolution of juvenile justice laws in India. So I feel you also need to talk about international law, and because I feel it is a doctrinal research, I think in the very title you should mention a comparative perspective, and we can see some different jurisdiction, how one country has dealt with the issue of internal displaced person. So you can mention it in the topic itself, and I'm sure you need to have one chapter. In the introduction chapter, you will talk about all the research objective, methodology. Another chapter you have to talk about evolution of international law and how this topic is placed under the wide scope of international law. Then I feel you need to talk about the Indian jurisdiction, and then you need to take some examples. You can also take some examples, illustrations, case studies. So, and then finally you have to answer the unanswered questions of your research question with one or more chapter. So, but then my suggestion would be, again, reframe your title. Please make it a bit narrower and also make it a bit broader by including the comparative perspective aspect, because when you are doing a comparative when you're doing a doctrinal research, you need to have enough literature here so that you can work on it.
Excuse me, ma'am. I have
Yes.
some like I cannot mute on.
Oh,
That's why
okay,
unmute.
okay.
That's why I am in mute. So, ma'am, mine is I thought that I'll be doing an empirical research. I'm from Manipur.
Okay.
In Manipur, there is an ongoing ethnic conflict, ethnic violence in Manipur, which erupted in May 2023, and it has resulted a significant loss of life, destruction of property, and there is like more than 60,000 internal displaced person in Manipur. So I have some interest in doing that, and I thought that my tentative topic will be like assessing the application and effectiveness of international legal framework in protecting IDPs, which
Yeah, got it.
in Manipur conflict, a study on international humanitarian law and guiding principle on internal displaced person.
So are you also going to refer to any other jurisdiction? How do they deal with the same issue? Is it going to be comparative research also?
Right now, I'm not thinking, ma'am.
Okay. Maybe when you do some further literature review, you would like to introduce, because ultimately you will also be making some suggestions, right? So because you are saying that it's going to be an empirical research in the state of Manipur, you need to first again fix your sample size. You need to fix your tool, whether you are going to interview, if you are going to interview, whether you are going to make it qualitative, quantitative, in the sense whether you will have open-ended question or you will have close-ended question. You need to fix on that. Firstly, Inam, it's a very interesting topic. Congratulations on that. So in your first
Thank you,
chapter,
ma'am.
you have to first highlight why this is an issue. If you have some government reports also which suggest that there have been some violations there, because when you use the word assessing, that means you are in the process of assessment, but still there must be some motivation to conduct this research. So first chapter, in the very background, you have to highlight the need and significance of this topic to be researched. Once you do that in your research objectives, again, you have to highlight in the statement of problem also, you have to make sure that you are highlighting that it's going to be a combination research where you will be interviewing. Now, because I feel that it's going to be a very core empirical research, the sample size should be more, and you should also mention how are you going to choose them, whether you are going to do a purposive sampling, you are randomly going to choose people, how are you going to choose them. This should also be decided in the very first chapter. Now, once you have done this, one chapter on IDPs in the international law, because this background, this framework, and I feel this should be your chapter 2, right? And literature review, you can do it in the very first chapter in your case if your supervisor approves for it. I feel that you should do it in the very first chapter, because I am not very sure whether you will be finding enough literature on this area or not, but ultimately you have to do some examination. Second chapter should be on the basis of legal framework. Now, here you may choose different jurisdictions also, how do they deal with it, right? Then you can also choose some other jurisdictions as well, right? So furthermore, third chapter can be some case studies. Fourth chapter may be dedicated to your empirical research. Then in the next chapter you can have results and discussion, and finally the conclusion chapter. I hope that helps you.
Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank
Good
you so much,
evening,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. Yes. I think Mr. Mahindra is speaking.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Manindra.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, my
Hmm.
research topic is a socio-legal study on disaster management with special reference to Odisha. So I have done 7 chapters and I have
Hmm.
written everything, and I'm doing a empirical study of taking 9 district of qualitative data empirical study, and I
Hmm.
have collected around 540 samples, 30
Hmm.
questionnaires. So I just finished all the chapters rough. So I got around 442 pages. Like first chapter is introduction, second one is disaster vulnerability risk. These are the kind of basic definitions and the process.
Hmm.
Third chapter is international perspective of taking 5 countries, and fourth one is Indian scenario of disaster management law, and then sixth chapter is judicial interpretation of disaster related vulnerabilities. Then sixth chapter is mine disaster related to my empirical study related to Odisha. And seventh is conclusion, hypothesis testing, and recommendation. Ma'am, in my Odisha chapter, I have done 92 pages. I don't know other chapters I am refining, those are 60, 67 pages, so I have reduced to 50 or something like that. But because 30 questionnaires are there, so I did statistical analysis, and in my I have taken SPSS as I have attended that seminar before. So each question have one graph and one table. So I don't know, I'm very confused how to reduce that 92 numbers, or what shall I do? I have 7 chapters. Uh,
Manindra, first of all, congratulations, because you are almost at the uh, end stage. I don't think there is any need to reduce it. Empirical research usually would have so many pages. So doesn't matter if you have more number of chapters. Usually 8 to 9 chapters is fine. They suggest the 6 to 7 chapters should be there. But depending, because you have conducted an empirical research in 9 districts, and if it has been approved by your supervisor, fair enough. But if you feel that you need to reduce the number of pages for your empirical research, like what I did in my case, I had a separate chapter on empirical research and I had a separate chapter on results and discussion. So the results and discussion was a separate chapter, so I had taken some part of it in that. Also, many things I had annexed in the annexure. So annexure is not counted as total number of pages. So if you can annex something from your empirical research in the appendices and annexes, that should be good. Otherwise, if your research would be incomplete, without including those points, I would not recommend you to reducing the number of pages. That is fine. There is no limit on maximum number of pages. Ultimately, it's your research. If you can defend it, if you can justify it, this is the reason why we have public voice, viva voice, and defense, right? If you are able to justify it, no issues at all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good
Good
evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I am Poonam.
Yes, Poonam.
I want to ask, my topic is a study of mega merger in the Indian banking sector, and I have three different objective in my study, ma'am. I have written, I have done my work on literature review, but ma'am, I want to ask that how should I arrange review of literature, objective wise or chronological wise or alphabetically?
Okay. So, see, there are different ways. Mostly people do it in chronological order. So, the research that they have, which was conducted in 2005, would come first, and then 2007 would come later. So, it's in the chronological order. That is one way. Another way is you collect all the literature and you write it in a flow. You write the gaps along with it. That 5 researchers have dealt with this particular issue, and none of them have answered this particular issue. So this is one gap. So it totally depends upon you and your supervisor. Which way are you going to choose? Are you going to use thematic way of literature review, or are you just going to do it in the chronological order, or you are going to use it on the basis of your research objectives? Like you said, there are 3 research objectives. So should I divide my literature review also into 3 parts, that these many literature are going to talk about these many this particular research question? So it totally depends upon you. However, I feel the most effective way is thematic way. It's not necessary always that you do it in a chronological order. I feel that do not divide it into 3 parts also. I feel that you club literature which are similar in nature, and you divide theme. Okay, that first theme is related to, like in my case, what I did, because it was a socio-legal study on parental incarceration. So first part of literature only dealt with child, society, and law. Then criminal justice system, and so I had given broader headings. However, later on I was suggested that no, you do it in chronological order. So ultimately it should make sense, and ultimately it should highlight the gap. You can choose any of these ways, but then you need to be able to justify it, right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I feel you can go ahead with the thematic way, whereby you are clubbing similar literature, you are writing and analyzing their summary together, and you are highlighting the gap. So according to me, this should be the best way.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I think last question, sir has mentioned. I'll take one last question of Radhika. Her topic is
Yeah, status of senior citizen in the South Gujarat under the Maintenance and Welfare Parents of Senior Citizen Act 2007.
okay. So Radhika, are you there? It's an empirical research.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So because you have mentioned Gujarat, so again you have to specify either in the title itself, or in, because you can't cover the whole of Gujarat, right? You have to specify which area of Gujarat, whether you are going to deal with Ahmedabad, Surat, Vadodara. That should be done, because it's
Indra.
going to be an I think somebody should mute. Yeah. So I feel you need to specify that also. And because you are going to talk about the Senior Citizen Acts, there is a statutory framework. There are apart from this act also, and this act also was enacted in 2007. How it evolved, you need to have one chapter on that aspect also. In one chapter, you need to also highlight about, in fact, you can do this in your literature review itself, whereby you are highlighting the issues and challenges. Why senior citizens should be treated differently? Why should we have a separate law? So you need to talk about the justification of this legislation also, when you are talking about the significance of your research in the very first chapter. When you talk about empirical research, I'm not sure who is going to be a participant, whether the senior citizens or or the NGOs which work for the welfare of the senior citizens, or you are going to talk to the authorities. So you need to specify that also in your empirical research chapter. Again, you need to be very, very, very specific. What is going to be your research tool? How many senior citizens are you going to interview? And again, because this act deals with a lot many aspects, are you going to deal with their maintenance aspect? Because there are other legislations also which talk about maintenance of senior citizens. If you look into the Hindu Maintenance and Adoption Act, in fact, even if you look into CRPC 125, which is now BNSS 144, the obligation of a son or a daughter to maintain the parent. So you need to specify that also, and you need to connect it with other legislations as well. So, and in fact, for your empirical research also, please do a proper planning, because you can't cover the whole of Gujarat. Have one chapter on empirical research, but predefine your sample size, your universe. And if you have any previous research which has already highlighted, or there is any statistics, how many senior citizens are there in Gujarat, how many of them belong to the below poverty line. So I think that would be good. Furthermore, because you're talking about senior citizens, I think you should also narrow down senior citizen between 60 to 70, between 70 to 80, between, or you are going to talk only about women, you are going to talk about men, you are going to talk about couple, or you are going to talk about you are not going to look into that aspect. All those things should also be included in your limitations, or in your very first chapter. So I think that is my suggestion. It's a very broad topic. First of all, narrow it down, redefine your research objectives and questions, and then you work on your chapters. I think, sir.
Yeah. So there are other questions for also the participant. You can just please reach out to Dr. Nidhi later on, and then and basic some homework. Don't go abruptly, like, because you have to do some homework before asking question. I know participants are, LLM or faculty members are there. So please, start working on your chapterization. I remember in my PhD there was a 8 9 chapter, and then my guide 5 to 6, that's it. Then I reduce chapter, I club those chapter in one chapter. So those things are there. Definitely, it can be refined later on. You start working on and scale it on, I would say, and then it can be merged, or it can go into subtopic also, depending upon the, and nothing straight jacket. You at least stated in the beginning, people start thinking we have to follow blindly, because in literature review, I also put up literature review, because Sodh Ganga I also picked up. Then my guy told me, sir, Kalpesh, in law, literature review will be in the first chapter, not in second chapter. So we have to also listen to guide also, and then so generally other discipline, again you rightly stated, like depending upon the topic. So extensive literature, we can have chapter 2 as a literature review, that can be also done. So yes, participant, please reach out to, like, email ID is there, so you can reach out to Dr. Nidhi later on. And then I would like to thank on behalf of Law Teachers India for sparing a valuable time. And then look forward to see you in future programs also. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.